John Locke, not the guy from Lost, the pseudo-founding father of the United States, proposed that all men were naturally free and equal. Every man has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of not happiness, property. Property was man's inalienable right. He proposed that self-ownership was still possible when people abandon the state of nature because the government will never abuse their power arbitrarily. The state will always uphold nature's most fundamental rule: self-preservation.
Oh, and keep out on the road.
So I have this issue where my parental unit and I will start watching a movie marathon, and then after the first one we forget that we're having a movie marathon, so that means that I've seen Mission Impossible, the first one, about 9 bazillion times. It's a part of my bones at this point. Consequently, I have an immense fondness for this film. Unfortunately, the hair is a 2 out of 10, a tad bit too spiky for me. But to compensate, this Tom Cruise is a petty asshole.
What's the matter? You've never seen this trick?
The future Ethan Hunt is stoic and masculine and a very good boy. He's very good, and he's a good boy.
He's a good man.
You're my best man. A specialist without equal.
Very good boy. So I just really love that this Ethan Hunt is a messy, petty asshole who will cuck you.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, Ethan.
However, this film means a lot more to Tom Cruise than it does to me. Cruise co-produced the film, and it was a pretty risky venture. Nobody dared adapt a TV show, but it went pretty well. It made $456 million in the box office, a portion of which now went to Tom Cruise. A few important developments from this film. 1, Tom Cruise developed a taste for that yum control. Ooh, let me produce all my projects. Ooh. 2, the formula for the Mission Impossible franchise was secured. 1, the IMF tells him to do something. 2, it goes wrong and he gets blamed for it. 3, he goes rogue. 4, gets betrayed from within his team or institution like the IMF, the CIA, the FBI. 5, accomplish mission. And it's effective. It's a sort of brilliant reversal of the cat and mouse detective crime story. The usual good guys, I can't snort. That thing, oh, there it is. The usual good guys, the usual good guys, the cops, the detectives, the state, are wrongly hunting Ethan, so Ethan just must do crimes to save the world. Ethan Hunt has to become the sneaky cat hunting the real bad guy and be the mouse doing the extra legal missions. He doesn't break into stuff to steal like a big bag of money with a big dollar sign on it or a diamond locked in a little glass case with a bunch of wires. He's in there for a Knox list or a world-ending device or like launch codes or nuclear launch codes or, you know, maybe like a nuclear bomb or a nuclear bomb. You know, one time it was actually a nuclear bomb and then the other time it was a nuclear bomb. But he doesn't indulge in silly mouse behavior like swimming in toilets, cooking delicious meals, eating cheese, solving crime, having sexual tension with your villain character. Ethan Hunt is big mouse behavior. He's literally drawn Mill Stilton. Think about it. Puns? More interesting femme character? He's amazing. He's terrific. Watch out, well, he's generific. However, I don't think compelling drama is the sole reason for Ethan Hunt's roguishness. No, it's probably the propaganda.
Starting in the mid-90s, the CIA hired former spy Chase Brandon to work directly with studios and production companies.
IMF is a group of operatives that can do all of the non-attributable things that CIA couldn't do.
Brandon commented on his agency's successes. We've always been portrayed erroneously as evil and Machiavellian. It took us a long time to support projects that portray us in the light we want to be seen in.
Oh, no.
While the military propaganda is pretty obvious in the latest installments, well, but ooh, look at this badass jet, and this cool plane, and this really lovely president, and the touching story of how cool the US is. Early Mission Impossible films were slightly more subtle as crime stories following in the footsteps of dubious classics like Dirty Harry. Mission Impossible films inherit police culture's defining value: self-preservation. otherwise known as the Thin Blue Line. This myth constructs the police as the final line of defense separating civil order from anarchic chaos.
Author of this apocalyptic manifesto calling for the destruction of the current world order.
Within this mean world syndrome, police culture casts everyone outside the force as potentially dangerous. Unconditional loyalty to fellow officers becomes an existential necessity. To survive in this high-stakes environment, officers must only trust their peers.
CIA has been infiltrated. I don't trust anybody outside of this room.
This loyalty justifies unethical behavior such as excessive force, refusal to snitch,
I can neither confirm nor deny details of any such operation without the Secretary's approval.
and legal abuses committed in the name of protecting fellow officers. On top of all of that, police culture frames the criminal justice system, the public, the media, and all administrative bodies as adversaries rather than partners in the pursuit of justice.
What if this panel sends us somewhere we don't think we should go? What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
Those who dissent from these norms and dare seek accountability also face ostracism.
No matter what they tell you at the academy, no matter how much you represent the badge they pin on you, there is still something called the blue wall of silence. You rat on a fellow officer, you're the marked man.
So when Ethan Hunt inevitably turns rogue in Mission Impossible and announces all external regulation, it symbolically represents the real dangers of the hostile relationship between police and governing bodies and, well, American exceptionalism at large. This tension between bureaucratic reform and the culture of police work is evident in the failure of current use of force policies. After George Floyd's murder in 2020, there were urgent calls to restrict police power. Certain use of force policies were formulated and enacted, such as in the 33 jurisdictions that restricted chokehold maneuvers. However, evidence is mixed regarding these policies' effectiveness. Currently, 2022 was the most deadly year for civilians since 2013, with over 1,000 civilian deaths. The problem is not merely the presence or absence of policy, but that reforms are often superficial, still legitimizing individual police officers' use of their own individual discretion, reinforcing a police culture that rebels against reform itself. These reforms do not address the reality that policing itself is poisonous, founded on racism, and designed to protect property, not people. As such, police will still be free to determine what force is necessary for their own survival. The Mission Impossible narrative exemplifies this.
And sometimes Ethan is the only one capable of seeing the only way.
Agents acting outside of institutional oversight become necessary heroes in a world that is chaotic and evil and hostile. They are also agents of American exceptionalism, the belief that the United States has a special and unique responsibility to protect and save the world and, preserve their own superiority. This belief, of course, only masks the contradictions of a liberal state that demands both adherence to the law and the individual autonomy to circumvent it when deemed necessary.
Did the United Nations Security Council approve the war in Iraq? Kofi Annan said it was a violation of international law. No, they didn't.
Moreover, American exceptionalism justifies the projections of the U.S. power globally through militarized operations and covert black CIA IMF ops.
The other set then is covert action or efforts to influence the politics or behavior of a foreign country.
Maybe you have dictatorship. We might be the ones to actually go help train and support an insurgency to overthrow some type of system that we didn't want to see in place.
I mean, 9/11 was bad enough. It could have been worse. Let's imagine. Suppose that Al-Qaeda had bombed the White House, killed the president, installed a military dictatorship.
The most successful big operation was getting the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. Big operation, probably $1 billion over 10 years. Then we called them freedom fighters. Later, much of it turned out to be the Taliban.
Established a major international terrorist institution in the United States, which was overthrowing governments all over the world. That would have been a lot worse than 9/11. It happened on 9/11 in Chile.
The mean world syndrome, the us versus me mentality, is framed as the world's saving grace in Mission Impossible films. But that's not to say that it's unrefined propaganda. Take the first Mission Impossible film. Characteristic of any De Palma, petty asshole Tom Cruise is hyper-paranoid, violent, and about one tickle away from an exploded ulcer. While it also thanks the CIA in its credits, it almost very nearly seems to critique the conditions that copy and paste bad police officers. I guess that's pretty redundant. Whenever James Bond or Mission Impossible does a disenfranchised former officer creates a network of other really sad officers
Trained to do what we do, imbued with a new sense of purpose, destroy the system that created them.
somewhat understands the institutional failure of policing itself or the CIA to care for their officers.
Why we toppled all those dictators, undermined all those regimes, only to come home. Well done, good job, but sorry, old boy. Everything you risked your life and limb for has changed.
Scholars like Alex Vital critiques how neoliberal managerialism depoliticizes police reform and leaves officers unsupported amid escalating demands. The threat comes within the IMF because the IMF is an inherently bad system. The films quite accurately display how this failed system creates officers who are burnt out, isolated, and ethically corroded.
You've trapped all the rats, and one by one, they start eating each other until there are only 2 left, the 2 survivors. But now they don't eat coconut anymore. Now they only eat rat. You have changed their nature.
However, as the films have transformed from cool crime capers to Ethan Hunt is an invisible god in this really cool superhero movie, all types of self-scrutiny have disappeared like a sleeve of rice cakes when I'm in the room. Thus, Mission Impossible's trope of the rogue agent is not endlessly repeated because it's entertaining, rather because of its propagandistic power that somewhat self-critically reflects the real-world consequences of institutional betrayal and the perils of excessive individualism in policing and American culture at large. It's a microcosm of liberalism's failure to reconcile its ideals with its practices of power and control. This may shock you, but I was not a big fan of Final Reckoning. Mission Impossible 9 Part 2 The Final Reckoning follows Ethan Hunt and his team on their journey to destroy the Entity, a super AI thing. Humanity is also on the brink of nuclear war because AI destroyed the truth and created a cult of followers just jazzed for technological rapture. It was perfectly extraordinary, the set pieces were exciting, the action was nerve-biting, and the premise of an old man who proves it really is because of that damn phone, well, that certainly compels me. However, it did feel like 2.5 hours of this. Ethan, you're so cool. Okay, this is the plan. This is how we're going to do our plan. Ethan, you're going to die. This is how you're going to die. Now disarm this bomb, and this bomb. Oh, and you disarm this bomb, and you disarm this bomb. You disarm this bomb. Disarm this bomb. In essence, almost 3 hours of repetitive stunts and exposition dumps. Maddie, you're so clever. However, it was the themes that truly dissembled the film from the inside out. Because MI9 is not fighting against man nor country, but AI, the voluntary submission of humanity into technological claws and cogs. MI9 constrains Ethan with 2 options. 1, give in to the machine. 2, let humanity go extinct. While this may have seemed like a bit of a left turn for the series, the entire franchise has been a bit obsessed with the existential threat of technology.
This story about how the world would eventually be eviscerated by technology.
Even in 1996, the thrust of the Mission Impossible film was cybersecurity and a hard drive. Perhaps what distinguishes Mission Impossible as such a long, thriving series is its ability to maintain the stakes of a spy thriller in a supposedly post-Cold War, end-of-history world. Namely, by maintaining what made the Cold War particularly yikesy. Nuclear war! Only this time the nuclear bomb is AI. The boomers had bombs, and the zoomers have ChatGPT. MI9's grand proposal for this series-long technological anxiety is free will and human kindness. In a posthumous monologue, Luther consoles Ethan, telling him he always has a choice, that he is the master of his fate. Free will is, on page, a perfect theme for a Mission Impossible film. Each installment has Ethan face a trolley problem. Everything tells him that the only possible choice is failure, that he must pull a lever, yet endlessly he discovers a way to be free. He does the impossible. As I explained in my Barbie video, it's prohibition itself that proves we are free to choose. Typically, technological determinism, the proposition that technology determines the shape of human society, has also dominated our discourse about how we solve the problems technology produces. With more technology. You know, like when we said we could fix online fascism and incels and stuff with YouTube video essays? anyways, they display that the human freedom to act on their reason to find goodness will defeat AI, which is cool. I like that. From another underbaked character perspective, free will as redemption is certainly something. Ethan Hunt's arc in this film is supposedly him reckoning with his past. The mistakes and crimes that forced him into the IMF because of the first false choice he was forced into is lifted from his shoulders because of his altruistic care for the nameless and the knownless. The only burden on his shoulders now is that of Atlas. Something destiny is not written in the stars or in history but in ourselves, blah 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 blah. From the propaganda perspective, reminding the audience that the only reason Ethan Hunt can save the world is because he can do whatever he wants and that it is his individual agency that is the most important thing in the whole wide world, well, that's a bit of a yikes. The same tensions that plague the libertarian belief that freedom is to be free from, rather than to commit to engage with, to believe in, render the cohesiveness of the film asunder. The conclusion is the most apt display of why individual free will is foremost a potent propagandistic choice. After the film spends a quarter of my life expositing why it is necessary for Ethan Hunt to destroy the entity, his team just hands it over to him in a USB stick. The power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Except there's no with absolute power corrupts absolutely, because he's the goodest boy, and you know, goodest boys can't do bad things. In essence, a monopoly on violence and power is not a violation of others' freedom as long as it is red, white, and only you. I don't typically make thing bad videos. I'm not a thing bad person. However, I do feel it is important to be critical and curious about the artifacts that we find pleasurable, but know are ethically and, you know, have deleterious political agendas. The justifications for injustice can be just as influential as a nuclear arsenal. When countries or groups or artists monopolize the power to narrate, they can limit our ability to imagine different futures. Nevertheless, I do not want to treat you, my fair audience, if I can call you that, as what Stuart Hall would call cultural dupes. So far, this review has committed the sin of the hypodermic model of communication, which posits that exposure to a media message influences all audiences homogeneously. For this position that the internet so adores ignores the fact that an audience's history, identity, and culture will shape how they receive messages. For example, I, a Canadian, am not going to start longing for Tom Cruise to become the president and annex Canada. I was prompted to be curious about an anti-AI message that would typically lure me in. Thus, I am simply non-judgmentally inviting you to exercise your own free will, but not for your self-preservation or comfort. For you to use a type of agency that allows you to have uncomfortable, not fun experiences with art all the time, for it to feel like you're sitting in a really loud, squishy beanbag chair rather than a really lovely long sage lounge. If Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is right, and free will doesn't exist, then use it. Taste your agency. Push it against your teeth. Don't let it metabolize easily. And chew. Go rogue.
You believe in the notion of progress, do you?
I suppose if you want to call it that, yeah.
It makes you very American.
Oh, does it?
Yes.
Well,
we will all get to heaven by and by somehow.
No, I don't consider it heaven at all. I consider it, no, my vision is formed in a very different way from that, Judy. It has nothing to do with a heaven. It has to do with the imperfections of a world that I'm living in, and that my work is to help alter. I do believe in evolution, and that is different from the concept of progress.
So you haven't felt...
I do believe that if we can keep, that if we can survive, and if we can teach, if we can keep this whole crazy thing going long enough, we will find a way out. We will work our way out, but in some ways it's kind of like those 500 months.
Sorry I disappeared for like over a year. I'm really depressed. But this was really fun to do, and I think it's trying to find a way to enjoy doing this again. And I really appreciate the community that has not left me and has still invited me to make the video. I say special shout out to Turb and Aronach, men from Canada. They've kept me going, and thanks for you for not like unsubscribing, I suppose. Big suggestion to watch all Skip Intros videos and propaganda to learn more. I'm not really good off the cuff, obviously, but yeah, thank you, and I guess keep climbing.